In order to understand the problem that we are currently in, I'm going to go ahead and open up our network tab all over again. So I'm going to go over to the network, and I am going to just refresh the page entirely. Let's clear the network, and let's just take a look at what's happening here. So I am going to go over here. I'm going to intersect that last card. You can see what we're doing, and hopefully we can see what we're doing. It's a little bit small, but we are intersecting this last card. So we're making a request with this offset of 12. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at the response that we get back. And as you can see, the response that we get back is this new array of data. And thus we're adding it to the end of our data list. And this is looking all fine and dandy. It's great. So now I'm going to go ahead and scroll. And now we're making the exact same request. I'm going to take a look at the response that we get back, which is this array of data. And I'm going to keep doing this for a while. Let's go ahead and go through this loading state. Let's do it a few more times. And I want to do it until we reach that weird state that we were in before. There we go. So this is the state that we were in before. So now look at this. Look what's happening. We're just continuously making the API call, and we're just adding more and more to the offset. However, let's look at the response. The response is a completely empty array. Now, why is this happening? Well, it's because we have reached a point where we have no more data that we can serve you within our database. Because remember, we only had 80 different movies. And if I were to count this, we already did that before, we already fetched 80 entries. We fetched all 80 of them. So what we need to do is we need to account for that. We need to account, hey, do we even have more data to present? Because right now what we're in is this consistent ugly loading state, because we're always going to be intersecting this last card. So we're in this loading state to fetch data at this offset that it will always return to us an empty array. We're then adding that empty array into our existing data, and then we're still going to be intersecting this card over here, and thus we're kind of in this vicious cycle. So what we need to do is we need to account for that. Obviously, this is not what we want. So here's how we're going to account for it. Our server, this right over here, our server not only is going to send us the response, the actual data itself, the array of movies, it's also going to send us the count, the total amount of movies that exist within our DB. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say response. Instead of saying response.send, I'm going to say response.json. And then over here, I'm going to make this a curly bracket. And I'm going to say here, data, I'm going to say colon. And then, or you know what, let's just call this movies rather, because I think it's a little bit more descriptive. So I'm going to say movies, and then I'm going to say count is equal to movies.length. So now what we're doing is we are sending back the movies as well as the count. Now, if I were to refresh the application, I think things you might expect are going to start to fail, and that's because movies.map is not a function. Because now what we're doing is within our hook, we're getting the response here, but now what we need to do is we need to account for the response.data.movies and not the response.data by itself. So I'm going to go here, just account for that. And I believe at this point we should be at a state. I'm going to go ahead and just refresh. We should be at a state where our application worked the way that it used to work before. So there we go. We're getting our data, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so this is great. However, again, I'm going to try to scroll all the way down to the last point here, so we can get that ugly state that we were looking into. Let's go here. Is this it? Yeah, that's it. So now we're in this ugly state. So what I would like to do now is, if we have already fetched all of the data, so I'm going to go over to the use hook. So I'm going to go ahead and store the count as a piece of state. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, if the data that we have already, if its length is greater than the count, then what I want to do is I just want to not fetch the data. I want to kind of return early. So let's go ahead and implement that solution. So I'm going to go right about here, and I'm going to define a brand new piece of state. So let's define it right here. I'm going to say const, and I'm going to say count as well as set count. I'm going to say that that is going to be equal to use state. And initially, I'm going to give this the value of null. And then over here, what we're going to do is I'm going to say that this is going to be a number or null. Let's go ahead and save that now. And then over here, as soon as we make a request, remember, we're going to get the response as well as the count. So as well as setting the count and dispatching it, I'm also going to set, or as well as setting the movies rather and dispatching it, I'm going to go ahead and set the count to response.data.count. All right, so now we have that data within our state here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, if the data is defined and the count is defined, and so if we have data and we also have a count, because initially, remember, both of them can be null, and then I'm going to say and the data dot length is greater than or equal to the count, what we're going to do is we're just going to return early. We're not going to go into this loading state. We are not going to try to fetch any data. We're not going to do any of that. So again, now let's go ahead and just refresh this. So over here, we have 12 pieces of data. We have 24 pieces of data, 36, 48. You should be getting more now. We're at 60 now. So we should be able to get more, 72. Or yeah, 72, I believe. And then lastly, all right, so now we have fetched all of our data. And if I were to try to scroll down, now we're not getting that loading state. So what we're doing is now we're not getting that ugly state. We're not showing anything loading when we're really not going to be fetching any data. And we're also not making network requests, which is going to make our application more efficient and also less expensive. So with that being said, that was quite a lot of work just for scroll-based pagination, but I think at this point you have a very, very solid understanding of what you need to do. This is a very, very valuable skill, and I really hope you guys took a lot from it. And with that being said, there's still a lot of more work that we need to do for our application to be completely functional. Let's go ahead and work on them in the next few sections.